The year is late 2025. You open X, formerly Twitter, and the timeline is a war zone. Sam Altman is on a podcast telling investors to sell their shares if they don't like his trillion-dollar spending plan. Microsoft is bleeding billions in quarterly losses. Anthropic users are screaming about rate limits. Everyone is panicking about Orion being delayed again. It feels like the AI industry is imploding, but it's not. It's just clarifying. While the cool startups were burning venture capital to rent Nvidia chips, one company was quietly building the mountain they were all trying to climb. They didn't rush. They didn't hype. They just bought the power plants. They printed their own chips. And last week, they dropped a model that makes ChatGPT look like a pocket calculator. In this video, I'm going to show you why the AI race is already over. The startups, OpenAI, xAI, Anthropic. They are just contestants in a game show. Google owns the network the show airs on. We're going to look at the Ironwood chips that killed the Nvidia tax, the terrifying reality of Gemini 3.0's infinite context, and why the most boring company in big tech has become the most dangerous. Buckle up, we're going to the Googleplex. We're 1. The contestants. Why the startups are doomed. Before we talk about why Google wins, we have to talk about why everyone else loses. Because as of November 2025, the cracks in the startup model aren't just visible, they are structural failures. The OpenAI implosion, the first mover curse. Remember when ChatGPT was magic? That was 2 years ago. Now, look at the state of OpenAI. In late 2024, we were promised Orion, GPT-5. We were told it would be a godlike intelligence. It is now November 2025. Where is it? Reports from the information this week suggest it's facing severe data shortages and isn't the leap we expected. Instead, we got O1 and incremental updates. Meanwhile, the burn rate is lethal. Microsoft's Q1 earnings report from October 2025 showed an $11.5 billion loss share attributed to their OpenAI investment. That is not sustainable. And the vibe? It's rancid. On November 1st, 2025, Sam Altman went on the BG2 podcast. When asked how he plans to pay for $1.4 trillion in infrastructure, he snapped, "If you want to sell your shares, I'll find you a buyer." That isn't the confidence of a winner. That is the defensiveness of a CEO who knows he doesn't own his own destiny. He's renting his compute from Microsoft, who rents it from Nvidia. He's a tenant. Tenants get evicted. Anthropic, the renter problem. I love Claude. You love Claude. Claude Opus 4.5, released yesterday, Nov 24, is brilliant. It's arguably the best coding model on Earth. But have you checked the Reddit threads lately? Rate limit exceeded. You're out of messages until 4 p.m. Anthropic is a software company fighting a hardware war. They rely on AWS and Google Cloud. They pay a premium for every token. They can't afford to give you infinite anything because their margins are razor thin. They are the artisanal coffee shop of AI. Google is Starbucks and the coffee bean plantation. xAI, the vibes play. Then there's Elon's xAI. They just dropped Grok 4.1 on November 17th. It's fun. It has personality. It can roast you based on your tweets. But vibes don't build a moat. Grok is trained on a massive cluster of Nvidia H100s and H200s. Who did they buy them from? Nvidia. Who manages the cloud? Oracle. xAI is just another customer in the supply chain. They don't control the stack. The takeaway. All of these companies have one thing in common: dependency. They all depend on Nvidia for chips. They depend on the energy grid for power. They depend on public web data that is rapidly drying up. Google depends on nobody. 2. The brain. Gemini 3.0 and the end of amnesia. Now, let's look at the weapon Google just unsheathed. On November 18th, 2025, Google announced Gemini 3.0. If you ignored Gemini 1.5 because it was cool to hate Google, you need to pay attention now. Infinite context streaming. The other models have a context window. It's a limit. GPT-4o holds about 128,000 tokens. Gemini 3.0 has effectively removed the ceiling. It doesn't just read a book. You can feed it the entire repository of your company's code, all your emails from the last decade, and every video you've ever recorded. The scenario: imagine you are a lawyer. The old way, Claude GPT, you upload a PDF, you ask a question. The AI reads that PDF. The Gemini 3.0 way: you connect Gemini to your firm's entire Google Drive. You ask, find me a precedent for this case from our archives between 2015 and 2020. It scans millions of documents instantly. It doesn't hallucinate because it has the source material right there in its working memory. This isn't a chatbot anymore. It's a research analyst that never sleeps and has a perfect memory. Generative UI, the app killer. This is the feature that should terrify startup founders. With Gemini 3.0, the AI doesn't just give you text, it generates user interfaces. If you ask, help me buy a pair of sneakers, it doesn't give you a list of links. It renders a shopping app right there in the chat, with buttons, filters, and checkout flows. Google isn't just replacing the search result, they're replacing the App Store. Why download an app if the AI can build a custom one for you in 2 seconds? Be honest, if your phone could just become the app you need, would you ever browse the App Store again? Let me know in the comments. I think the app economy just got a death sentence. 3. The muscle, Ironwood TPU v7, killing the Nvidia tax. Here is the economic reality that Sam Altman is losing sleep over. Everyone else pays the Nvidia tax. Nvidia has a monopoly on GPU hardware, and they charge 80% margins. That means for every $1 OpenAI spends on compute, 0.80 goes to Jensen Huang's leather jacket fund. Google realized this in 2015. They started building their own chips called TPUs, Tensor Processing Units. This month, November 2025, Google rolled out the Ironwood TPU v7, formerly codenamed Trillium. The superpod scale. Nvidia's best clusters connect maybe 576 GPUs efficiently. A single Ironwood pod connects 9,216 chips into a single supercomputer. They share 1.77 petabytes of memory. Why this matters? Training an AI model requires massive communication between chips. If the chips are far apart, the speed of light becomes a bottleneck. Google has built a dense computer that is physically closer together and more interconnected than anything OpenAI or Xa can buy. The cost advantage. Because Google designs the chip, the rack, the cooling and the data center, their cost per unit of compute is arguably 50% lower than their competitors. In a price war, and make no mistake, 2026 will be a price war, Google can drop the price of Gemini to $0. OpenAI cannot. They have to pay Microsoft. Microsoft has to pay Nvidia. Google can bleed them out. 4. The Trojan horse. You're already assimilated. Let's step away from the sci-fi chips and talk about something boring. Friction. Human beings are lazy. We're incredibly biologically lazy. We will choose a mediocre hamburger that is delivered to our door over a gourmet steak we have to drive 20 minutes to get. This is where OpenAI loses. To use ChatGPT, you have to open a browser, type in a URL, log in, deal with a Cloudflare verification to prove you aren't a robot, and then type your prompt. To use Google's AI, you just have to exist. The Android army. There are roughly 3 billion active Android devices on the planet. That is nearly half the human population. With the rollout of Gemini Nano, Google is putting a shrunken-down, highly efficient AI brain directly onto the silicon of your phone. It's not in the cloud, it's in your pocket. It reads your texts, it listens to your calls, for summarization purposes, obviously, and it organizes your photos. It doesn't need an internet connection to be smart. While Microsoft is trying to force Copilot onto Windows PCs, a platform people mostly use for work and gaming, Google owns the device you look at 80 times a day. The workspace lock-in. How many of you use Microsoft Word? Okay, how many of you use Google Docs? If you are under the age of 35, the answer is probably Google Docs. Google has the education market in a chokehold. They raised an entire generation on Chromebooks. Now look at the integration. You're writing an email in Gmail. You don't ask a chatbot for help. You just click the Help Me Write button that is already there. You're making a spreadsheet. You don't export data to a code interpreter. You just ask Gemini to analyze the trend inside the sheet. The scenario. Imagine Steve. Steve wants to plan a vacation. The OpenAI way. Steve asks ChatGPT for an itinerary. Then he has to go to Expedia to book flights. Then he goes to Gmail to check his confirmation numbers. Then he goes to Google Maps to check distances. The Google way. Steve says to his phone, plan a trip to Tokyo based on the dates I'm free in my calendar, and find hotels from my Gmail receipts that I liked last time. Gemini has access to Steve's calendar, maps, Gmail, and flights. It connects the dots. OpenAI is a brain in a jar. Google is a brain connected to your nervous system. This is the ecosystem moat. It doesn't matter if GPT-5, whenever it arrives, is 10% smarter than Gemini. If Gemini is 100% more accessible and integrated into your life, Gemini wins. Convenience always kills quality. Just ask MP3s, just ask Netflix. Fun fact, Google Maps has over 1 billion monthly active users. They have essentially digitized the physical surface of the Earth. Now they are applying AI to it to create immersive view. They aren't just indexing the web anymore, they are indexing reality. 5. Project Astra, the eyes of the machine. If you watched the updates from earlier this year, you saw the moment the ground shifted. It wasn't a graph, it was a demo called Project Astra. For the last 2 years, we've been obsessed with LLMs, large language models, text in, text out. But text is a low bandwidth compression of reality. A picture is worth 1,000 words, but a video is worth 1,000,000 tokens. The multimodal king. Google has been shouting native multimodal from the rooftops, and nobody was listening because we were too busy making memes. Native multimodal means the AI wasn't trained on text and then taught to see images later, like Frankenstein's monster. It was trained on text, images, audio and video simultaneously from day one. In the Project Astra demos, a user walked around an office with their phone camera open. The AI saw code on a whiteboard and explained it. It saw a broken part of a bicycle and identified the specific screw needed to fix it. It remembered where the user left their glasses. You left them by the red apple on the desk. Why, this is the end game. OpenAI is trying to build AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. Google is building an agent. There is a difference. An AGI thinks, an agent does. Google is positioning itself to be the layer between you and the physical world. With Google Lens, which gets 12 billion visual searches a month, they have the training data to make an AI that understands objects, not just words. The nightmare dream scenario. You're walking down the street in a foreign country. You're wearing AR glasses, rumoured to be the Google Iris reboot coming in 2026. You look at a restaurant menu. The AI translates it instantly. You look at the food. The AI tells you the calorie count and warns you it contains peanuts, which you're allergic to. You look at a stranger. The AI, well, let's hope it doesn't do facial recognition, but it could. Google has the data to make this happen. They have the Street View cars that have been driving around your neighbourhood for 15 years. They know what the world looks like. OpenAI only knows what the internet says the world looks like. This is the part where it gets a little Black Mirror. Would you wear glasses that let Google see everything you see if it meant you never lost your keys again? Let me know in the comments. I think I already know the answer for most of you. 6. The too big to fail defense antitrust update. But wait, you say, what about the government? What about the DOJ trying to break up Google? Let's look at the news from last Friday, November 21st, 2025. The closing arguments in the US versus Google Ad Tech trial just wrapped up in Virginia. For months, people speculated that Judge Leonie Brinkemer would drop the hammer and force Google to sell off Chrome or Android. But if you listen to her comments on Friday, the tone has shifted. She signalled deep skepticism about a breakup. She questioned the practicality of unwinding a company this integrated. The geopolitical shield, the China factor. Why the hesitation? Because the world looks very different in late 2025 than it did when this lawsuit started. The US government isn't stupid. They know that the next Cold War is being fought with code, not missiles. China has DeepSeek, Baidu and Alibaba working in lockstep with the state to build AI superiority. If the US government shatters Google into 5 smaller, weaker companies, they destroy America's best chance of winning the global AI arms race. Google has become a national security asset. The Pentagon needs Google's TPUs. The NSA needs Google's cybersecurity. The White House needs Google to stay ahead of Beijing. The antitrust theatre is just that, theatre. They might slap Google with a fine that looks big to us, $10 billion, but is basically a parking ticket to them. They might force some data sharing, but they will not touch the AI engine. They can't afford to. Google has effectively achieved sovereign state status. They have their own currency, compute, their own territory, data centres, their own power grid, nuclear, and their own foreign policy, lobbying. 7. The thermodynamic wall, nuclear Google. There is a hard limit to AI scaling that nobody likes to talk about. It's not data. It's not chips. It's physics. AI is incredibly thirsty. A single ChatGPT query uses 10 times the electricity of a Google search. To run the agents we talked about, you don't just need a data center, you need a dedicated power plant. Microsoft knows this. That's why they made headlines paying to restart 3 Mile Island for 2027. They are literally dusting off the radioactive ghost of the 1970s to power their chatbots. Google is playing a different game. They aren't looking backward. They are building the sci-fi future we were promised, the Kairos Power Deal. In late 2024, Google signed a historic deal to buy 500 megawatts of power from Kairos Power. These aren't your grandfather's nuclear plants. These are small modular reactors, SMRs, that use molten salt instead of water for cooling. The timeline. The first reactor comes online by 2030, with full deployment by 2035. The strategic implication: energy is the final bottleneck. If you have the chips, Ironwood, and the data, YouTube, but you don't have the juice, you die. Google has secured the juice. They are turning compute into a natural resource that they control the supply of. While Microsoft is fighting with homeowners over transmission lines to connect to the old grid, Google is effectively building its own private grid next to its data centers. Final thoughts. So let's recap the board state as we head into 2026. 1. Data. They own YouTube, the largest library of human behavior in history. 2. Hardware. They just launched Ironwood v7, freeing them from the Nvidia tax that is crushing OpenAI. 3. Brain. Gemini 3.0 has infinite context and is generating its own apps. 4. Distribution. They own Android, the window through which 3 billion people see the world. 5. Power. They are building private nuclear reactors to ensure they never run out of juice. 6. Protection. The US courts are realizing they are too vital to national security to destroy. While we were all mesmerized by the magic trick of ChatGPT, Google was buying the theatre, the power plant that lights the stage, and the printing press that makes the tickets. The AI race wasn't a sprint, it was a resource war. And while the startups were burning venture capital to rent shovels, Google bought the mountain, the verdict. Google will win not because they are the good guys. They will win because they are the infrastructure. You don't have to like the electric company to use electricity. You don't have to like Google to live in the future they are building. You will use their agents, their glasses, and their models because they will be faster, cheaper, and everywhere. The dinosaur didn't die. It just evolved into Godzilla. Visual. The narrator appears on screen one last time, looking slightly concerned. Narrator. But hey, that's just my analysis of the corporate dystopia. I want to hear from you. Are you ready to hand over your eyes and ears to Project Astra? Or are you sticking with the rebels at XAI and Anthropic? Leave a comment below. It helps the algorithm, which ironically is owned by Google. If you want to know how to survive in this new economy, check out this video right here. Thanks for watching and good luck.